In the last few weeks, I did see something that was apparently said by a Tory-affiliated baroness, which is along the lines of, if people could cook better, they wouldn't need food banks. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never, done a one-to-one equation of culinary prowess and financial security. Unless you're like Gordon Ramsay or Jamie Oliver, that's the only kind of situation, if you are professionally a chef, that your cooking ability has any relation to your financial security. Just being able to cook doesn't mean you suddenly have more income. Now, many people obviously have seen very heated debates over it, and many people, have perhaps come to the conclusion, and I'm maybe in agreement, giving benefit of the doubt a little, that she may be meant to say if people could cook better, they would need to use food banks less. But again, she's a baroness. She comes from a rather privileged background where you don't need to worry about sort of having the materials in. So for her, food banks are just this thing that poor people use. Unfortunately, with food banks, you are reliant upon what's there. It's not the same as going to a supermarket where you choose exactly what you want and you can choose things to craft a meal from. But with a food bank, it's whatever's there. If all they have available are frozen pizzas, ready meals, like simple things like that, then that's all you're going to get. And you can't make a frozen pizza last a week. You can't put it into another dish to make it go further. Well, you could, but that's weird. You can only use the resources that you have available to you. It's pretty self-explanatory. And this is what's driving people to food banks. They're using the resources they have available to them. Maybe they're spending, because it's like a case of, well, if, people have said if you've got no income, how are you meant to, get anything from the supermarket? So you're reliant on food banks. And people are like, well, how can you have no income? If everything you're earning is going towards keeping your house and keeping it warm and keeping, perhaps if you have children, keeping them fed ahead of yourself, and then you've got nothing left after everything, then yes, food banks are a viable alternative to starvation. It's not rocket science. So, it is very possible to have income and still be struggling. But that's the big problem. And that's what this baroness and many others have failed to understand. The core issue here isn't, can people cook? That's a whole separate issue. But I'm not great at cooking, and I'll be the first to admit it. But that's got nothing to do with what she's saying. Whilst I may have wanted to give benefit of the doubt earlier, I believe if you put a filter on her words, it would come out more like, it's your fault you're poor. It's your fault because you're poor. And that's the problem. That's the big issue. This elitist approach isn't helping anyone. Now, you often hear it's not like an overnight solution, and maybe not overnight. But if enough redistribution of wealth happened, you could still have the people who have earned it. I'm not saying the people who have done well and earned tons should suddenly, basically go to a much lower thing just to make sure everyone's equal. There can still be rewarding greater effort and greater, applicability of that effort, greater results. I don't see a problem with that. It's where a sort of element of meritocracy does make sense, but we need something that's less this big. That's the gulf at the moment. Even that would be drastically better. And yes, it's not overnight. Obviously, it does require a lot of paperwork and bureaucracy and figuring out how to make it work for everyone. But it's not as hard as it sounds. If these people were willing to kind of make a change, make people's lives better, then they could. There's no point blaming the poor for being poor. It's not doing anything about it. The only way that you stop blaming the poor for being poor is by looking at why they're poor. And if you can help them out of that poverty, and if it makes you feel better, Teach them to cook at the same time. So until next time, as always, take care.